Hey, welcome to back, I guess, part two of our economist, scientist, and planner attacking the novel. I, Great memory for me. Ding, ding, ding for me. The novel COVID-19, aka coronavirus, for all us normal folks who don't understand. Uh, and what we're going to do today is we laid down the base. So if you didn't listen to part one, it's not unnecessary, but there's a lot of great information for understanding about viruses and how viruses work and what that means. So there's a lot of great information there that's easily digestible and understandable. So make sure you catch into that and get some information from that. But what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit more about how to handle this, how to what do we do and what are the things that we do and how do those affect the outcome of this disease. At what point, Braden and I were just chatting, at what point does the curve in the U.S. start to flatten out, and how do our individual actions contribute to it one way or the other, and what does that curve mean to us as individuals and businesses and that. So let's kick it off with a little bit of what's the Trump declared or designate. What's the right word?
So as of Friday, Trump has declared a national state of emergency, which is a big break because that allows healthcare workers access to FEMA funds and frees up a ton of resources to be able to go out and increase the amount of testing that's available, increasing the amount of treatment that's available, and increasing the amount of relief available to businesses that are affected by shutdowns like we're seeing all across the country and we'll see more of as it continues to spread. On top of that, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and President Trump have allegedly come to a deal on how to...
Allegedly. I love how you say that. That just sums up the political environment.
Yes, it does.
They allegedly made a deal.
But they have reportedly made a deal that will see a massive increase in funding and a huge influx of testing available throughout the country. And that is pending vote on Monday in the Senate. Assuming because Trump has approved it already, if it passes the Senate, it should almost instantly be signed off, and we should see that massive influx in funding in the next few days.
So what does that mean? So that's because there's only so much time in the day, right? So throwing money at a problem always sounds good. It briefs well, right? And it's like, hey boss, if I only had $100,000 more dollars, I could solve this. If I only had $100 million, I could solve this. But what's the truth in that? Because does that mean we're going 24/7 on vaccine creation, studying, or what?
So we're already going full speed around the world in vaccine creation. At least 4 companies have moved into pending approval for animal phase trials, and that's going to take a while. But as they continue to progress and as other companies continue to progress, we get closer to human trials, and if the disease reaches a bad enough point, we'll forgo safety measures. But for now, it's more important to make sure that the vaccine is safe to administer and works than it is to rush through and get it out to people. Now, the increase in funding is huge because one of the biggest problems in America with this disease right now is that we are not testing people. We've been talking a lot, and Vice President Pence has put out statements that 1.5 million tests would be made available by last Friday. They were not. And for those of you who don't understand the process, testing for coronavirus is so simple, you could do it. But that assumes you have the test kit.
Because it's a lot like the DNA test, right? You do a swab of your saliva and you put it in a tube and send it away, and they test it. They put it in a lab, right?
Actually, no. So the way that the tests work, and when you hear about them sending out tests to hospitals and centers throughout the country, what they're doing is to test for it, all they're doing is they're taking your swab, your nasal swab, putting it into a solution, putting that solution into a container, flushing the container out, adding another solution to it, and seeing if it changes colors. Super easy if you've got the ingredients in front of you. The issue is creating that tube is a very difficult and complicated process wherein you need to isolate the antigens that present on the outside of the virus and affix them to the tube so that then it will bind to the antibodies you produce when you put them in. Then you need to put a antibody that will bind to those antibodies in there with a marker on it. So I've put my nasal swab in there. If I'm infected, it's bound to the viral particles that are in the tube. Then we rinse it out. Then I add the anti-antibodies that will bind to my antibodies that have bound to the particles in the tube. And on that, there's a chemical attached so that I flush it and I add a new chemical to it. And if that chemical changes colors, then that means I have the disease because I'm producing antibodies for it.
So the process, once it's created, is fairly simple.
Right. Any medical professional throughout this country can perform the test, but it takes a sterile lab and very competent personnel working hard to actually create tests to deliver. And so this big increase in funding is going to allow us to start to get more people creating those. And we had the CDC is meant to be able to handle these and has a spot for a pandemic response team whose sole purpose right now would be more or less containment and test production. But unfortunately, those spots have been vacant since the summer of 2018. And this new increase in funding will help to incentivize people to sign up for those positions again.
So one thing I was going to circle back on a little bit, we were talking the vaccines. So big news, and this is really good stuff we got to get out there because I don't think we mentioned it last time. Dogs cannot contract COVID-19. So we're okay. Everything's going to be fine.
Is okay.
Yeah, all of our nice furry boys are fine there. It's all right.
Actually, if I can address that real quick, because I know what you're talking about. So I read the article that everyone else read that talked about how a dog in China tested positive for coronavirus. And it did, because the way we test for coronavirus is we take a nasal swab, and if there's stuff in there that detects the coronavirus, then we assume it tests positive for the coronavirus. So I want to be very clear that animals are not carriers of a disease like immune people are. The disease is not reproducing in your dog, but your dog can be a carrier for a disease just like your chair can. If there is a virus on your dog and then you touch your dog, then the virus is now on you. So the next step here, how do I teach my dog to wash his paws? That's a big step then. You just got to put in the effort to train them on probably small treats. And
there we go. So one of the research facilities that has put together the early trials for the vaccine was up in Saskatchewan, which with the cancellation of all the sports, I just have to put it out there, get the joke in there of you take hockey away from Canadians for 2 damn days and they start figuring everything out. You know, I think we need to put a ban on maple syrup and then it's going to be done within a week, guys.
That's right.
They found out they were going to lose 1, potentially 2 hockey nights in Canada. And they got the wheels rolling.
That's right. Talk about a nation getting behind it, right?
Well, the Maple Leafs actually have a chance this time, so they can say they were going to lose the Stanley Cup, which they haven't been able to say for a while, right?
Well, speaking of sports, it's an interesting thing with all the suspended seasons. I think the XFL is the only league that is canceled season. Everybody else is talking suspends. So it's an interesting thing because if you think about it, particularly for baseball, I don't see that big of an effect because baseball, they can delay the start of the season and restart spring training, which is what they'll probably do. But if you think about the NBA, NHL, MLR, MLS was just starting, so we'll put them with baseball kind of in that same category. But these other leagues, those other 3 leagues are in mid-season stride. NHL and NBA, NHL more than the NBA. NBA's had a few more weeks before they would start talking playoffs seriously. But the NHL, they're already in that playoff positioning. Mm-hmm. We're 2/3 of the season into the NHL at least, right?
Playoffs, I believe, start at the end of April.
Yeah. So we're probably closer to
April 8th was the last day of games.
We were 30 days away from playoffs starting. So what do you do as a coach and a manager and a trainer in order to sustain that level as best you can, because of course you're not going to get the games, right? Because we all know about game fitness. There is practice fitness, and then there's game fitness,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always different. It is what we have to understand is how do you create that and try to sustain it so that you don't and let me back up, and I'll say, what can you do as a team manager, uh, coach, strength and conditioning coach, all level,
Mm-hmm.
to sustain your team's ability to perform and differentiate your team? Use this to everybody else is doing this thing in your league, but you're going to do this, and you're going to create a difference so that when it does start back up, whatever that startup wheel process is, that you have an advantage. So, I throw that out there kind of as a rhetorical, thought-provoking thing, because it's not a simple solution. There's not one size fits all either.
Yeah, and so I'd say, U of A, we're right in the middle of that. So we have a chance that we're going to be able to play some games here eventually down in April or May. But I mean, realistically, we can't do anything because the University of Arizona has canceled all. It's all online classes now, and campus is pretty much completely closed. So that trumps whatever D1A rugby decides to do. So our hands are tied on that. But I love this thought experiment, and as I'm thinking through it, it's like, really, how can you get that edge in competition when you're looking at this? I think the big things are I think you could use technology, and this is one of the areas I have notes for later, but I think you could use technology to your advantage as far as still keeping up the communication and the team camaraderie in that sense, whether it's, hopping on a Zoom call to talk through play calls or things like that, putting out film and coding film and doing all those type of things. But I think the big thing you can do, it's because it's all about getting the individual to work from home, basically, is what you're coming down to, because you can't practice together. So you're not going to be able to get even any sort of Zoom calls or anything like that. You're not going to be able to get that true cohesive nature that you're getting out of a team environment when you're actually practicing together. But I think what you can do is kind of steer into that skid and focus on the individual. And this is where, as a coach, I'd put in basically your woes, as John Patterson would put it, your work-ons and your work-ons and workouts. And that's basically where I think it is you're pushing people to get their personal fitness. Fitness probably not, more strength usually, because especially in like a rugby type game, game fitness versus gym fitness is completely different. But getting them working out, staying at least active so that they're not having any sort of issues with that kind of stuff. And then I think this is the time where you hone your craft as far as your skills go. You're passing the rugby ball against the wall because you're quarantined by yourself, and you got to work on that technique and get everything going there.
Yeah, well, I think that's some great points, and like I said, it's kind of rhetorical. And I mean, how much can you, if you're completely isolated and your team is not allowed to train together? It's really tough. It's going to be tough, and there's going to be some magic things. We're going to have to do some brainstorming on how we can do that. But I want to take a two-step, because I'm going to bring us back into the business world. But before I do that, I want to stay in the sports world. But now I want to shift us from the coach level to the team general manager level, to even the league president. So how does the league leadership in the sport handle this, and what do they do? And I don't even, we can, if we want to, jump into the economics of it. But I think at this point, I'm looking at a product, and that's why I think we can easily transition this into your business, and how you do it. But because we have a product, if I'm the president of the NHL, I have a product that I produce, and I have consumers. So how do I take care of my product and get it up and running again?
So I think I may be, as a fan, in the unpopular opinion area on this one. I think that it's something where, and you see this in all the different businesses, it's essentially just like how if you have any symptoms, you're quarantining yourself and we're kind of going through a pause. That's what it is. And you really have to look at it in that sense of, it is a true pause where you're not able to, there is no market demand, whether there's market demand for your product or not, or if you're able to supply that product anymore. The point is that it's not there. The supply and demand aren't meeting in that point anymore. And so what you have to do is maintain the quality of it for when it comes back around. And I think this is where you have where you can look at different leagues for different examples. For example, the NFL, because of where they're at in their season right now, they're not really doing anything because they don't have to. The point is, at this point in time, they're able to say, it'll hopefully be fine by then, and it's not damaging our product currently. So the other leagues have to look at that as, take the NHL example of, how can we maintain the quality of our product over the course of this 30-day pause without having any huge issues. The last example I'd like to draw here is you to look at the NHL versus MLR, Major League Rugby, because this is one of the concerns I've had. And of course, not as much talk about rugby, so it's not like I could go Google this and find some more stats on anything. But Major League Rugby's in its third season. It is I don't know how many pro rugby leagues in the U.S. and it's in its third season, and it is in a rocky situation because it is Major League Rugby, and where we don't have this strong foothold in the US. And so I think sports like that are where you're going to look at this larger impact, because they can't afford to pause as much. You're not going to be looking at the NHL just decided that it's going to be paying out all of the players their last three paychecks. MLR does not have the funds to be doing that as much without ticket sales, because they need to be selling the product in order to be able to pay their players. And so I think that's where you're going to get this little issue where some leagues, and I think, back to your main point, the business of sports and how they're similar, that's the same type of issue you're going to have in the business world, to where some companies are able to pause. And because I have enough money to go sit at home, and some companies can't. And that's where you're going to see the big difference.
Yeah, I didn't want to jump into business, but man, I mean, that's quite yet. I wanted to stay in the sports realm a little bit, but that is so point on, because looking at we've all heard about what Mark Cuban's doing, and damn good job, Mark. I'm proud of you for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got the capital, right? He has the reserves, which is awesome. And and some of the basketball players I've read, Zion Williamson is donating money to arena employees and all these sort of things, which is awesome and great that they have the funds to do that. But when you break down to 80% of businesses in the U.S. are small businesses, and a lot of them, their payroll is like, if their AR, their accounts receivable, starts to drift by 5 to 7 days, then guess what? They're going to have trouble making payroll. There's a lot of business owners out there who lose sleep every 30 days when how they're going to make a payroll, or the poor bastards who pay twice a month and doing that lose sleep at least twice a month, right? How am I going to make payroll? So what do these guys and gals do that are business owners that have that? They're no longer, let's say you're a restaurant or a bar, mm-hmm. and people I've been to a couple of events this week. Wednesday, I went to a large event that had about half the people that it normally has. Friday, I went to another event and it had about half. So you think about that in the revenue sort of stream. And if I've got a 50% reduction in revenue, I have to start, what do I do? Do I start laying off my team? How do I pay my team? Are they gainfully employed? All these decisions we got to make as business owners. And it's a tough place to be, and there's no simple solution. I think it's going to have to be, a breakdown, and how do you handle it for your company? But,
right. And I think that's an area where it goes back to, and this is something we kind of touched on a little bit, as far as, this is where you have to have a very calculated intervention as far as the market goes. You have to make sure you're intervening with the right kind of mechanism that is actually going to move things forward or to help people out. This is not an area where you need to be, for instance, we don't need to be paying airline companies to keep flying empty planes. That doesn't need to happen. But as the counter example, you can take that type of money, and if you're putting it more towards, like we're saying, the small businesses who are not able, who are on that short time frame where they can't pause for 30 months or for 30 days, excuse me, or we're putting it more towards, like they've talked about, payroll tax elimination for the rest of the year and those type of things, where we're actually giving it to each individual so that they have their economic freedom to move the market the way that it needs to. Because there are plenty of things to spend money on, basically, right now. There are plenty of areas and plenty of industries that are still working and that people will spend money on. Toilet paper, there's your example, right? Everyone wants to go out and buy their toilet paper right now, even though it's freaking stupid. Everyone wants to. If you're not getting your paycheck, you're not able to go buy your toilet paper, right? And that's where you see the second and third order of effect in the economy, to where not only are the businesses going to slow down because there's not a demand for their products, but then because of the labor shortage, or because there's a labor demand shortage, you're then having less wages put into the economy and less disposable income, which then hits even more industries that way.
Well, I think that's why we're seeing the Dow futures has been, over the last month, really taking a hit as people prepare for spending is going to go down because people are going to go out of their house less, they're going to do less, they're going to make less. But we should see a big impact on, or at least economically, coming next week with the approval of the relief bill that's waiting at the Senate. That should hopefully see a lot of funds going to small businesses and guaranteeing paid sick leave and getting free tests and free care if you're infected with the coronavirus. Those should all do a lot to mitigate the impact of this, but we are still seeing a lot of signs and a lot of people discussing that the market has not dropped this fast since 1931. And as we all know, nothing bad happened after 1931.
Well, so I think it's really important to as we're getting into that here. So I think the best way to be thinking about this is the pause. I keep going back to that word, because what you're really looking at in so many different ways is an economic pause. And what the disease has created, just like it's created in all of our minds, it's created in the economy uncertainty. And uncertainty prohibits investment. That's where we're at right now. But it's one of those things where it will also shake out much more quickly towards the end, because as we're looking at it and we gain more certainty around what's going on and more certainty around what the effects of this disease are going to be, then more investments will come back out. That's why you're seeing such a huge drop right now, is because there's so many questions that are left unanswered. And until any of those questions are answered, it's going to keep looking the way it is. But it's really, the reason I say that is because it's very important to look at this in the grand scheme of things. It will, because of what's causing the drop, it will likely bounce back very well. We're looking at, let me look down at my notes just a second. So we're looking at roughly a 1.5% decline totally in global GDP is what's estimated based on this, because we're likely going to rebound very quickly back from it once we know where to rebound. Right now, there's just no idea of what is going to get hit. We know airlines are going to tank. That's all we got. We don't know when airlines are going to get better. We don't know any of that kind of stuff. And that type of uncertainty is what's going to compound into the lack of investments that we're seeing.
Right, because you don't want to dump $100,000 in oil, and 30 days later that oil is still sitting at $10 or even worse. It's you buy it at $80 a barrel, and over the next 30 days it's going to drop to $20 a barrel, and who knows when it's going to spike back up, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it will, but that goes into that uncertainty, and that's what affects it, and kind of that influence of where the dollars are being spent. And people, when you're in that uncertain mindset and you're in an uncertain environment, it's risk, right? So what is the acceptable risk? And this is a transition that I wanted to get to also, is as us as individuals and our businesses, is understanding the risks that we're encountering here and what it means. So, and Braden, I'm turning to you and to talking, at what point do me, the restaurant owner, the bar owner, I must be hungry and thirsty, but at what point do I say, well, for my economic well-being and for the well-being of my people, my team, what line, what's my threshold?
it's hard to say. Obviously, I can't give true bound advice of when this is happening is when you close your doors.
Right.
It's going to depend on the market. It's going to depend on your business. It's going to depend on your budget. And it's going to depend a lot on the disease. And as the disease spreads and we're seeing more and more cases going up, and in the next week, so the disease expands logarithmically. Each person infects 2 people. It's going to increase quickly. In the next week or 2, we're going to see even a much more explosive rate as the tests finally start rolling out. And you realize that there aren't 70 people in Colorado who have the disease right now. There's hundreds or thousands.
That's a good point. Jump back for a second on the education part, because we mentioned it earlier, flattening the curve. Could you just kind of walk us the algorithmic exponential curve that we're talking about, right? That's what you mean. And then what flattening it means, because I've seen that in more and more articles.
Yeah, that's the buzzword the last couple of days.
Yeah.
The disease spreads and grows as all pandemics do, into what equates to basically a bell curve. At the beginning, there's only one person. It's really slow to infect a second person. It's really slow to infect a third person, and it took months to infect the 20th person. But the more people who are infected, the more quickly it grows, and the more people who get infected the next day. And that's why we've seen more than 1,000 new cases in the US in the last week. Mm-hmm. And as it continues to grow like that, the potential to infect more people grows. Eventually, the growth rate will slow. Mm-hmm. If we do absolutely nothing different, business as usual, eventually the growth rate will slow, because eventually it will run out of healthy people to infect. So when we talk about flattening the curve, we're talking about lowering the apex to a point that's as manageable as possible. Mm-hmm. And these practices like social distancing and washing yourself more and being more aware of the disease are how we bring down the maximum number of people who've been infected. Because as people are already being infected, there's no prevention. Right. There's only mitigation.
Yeah.
And that's why you've seen people joking about, like, what is the benefit of a travel ban from Europe? That's great stage 1 anti-pandemic strategy, but we are well past that. And so we're looking to mitigate and treat the people who have it now. And the sooner we can start taking those precautions, the less of a huge impact it'll have, because the less people it'll infect. And I want to point out that the way it works like that is that the disease isn't hunting you down.
Here it comes.
If you stay in your home and no one comes into your home, you cannot contract the disease. Now that's not the right move right now, is to just never leave your house unless you are displaying symptoms or think you might be a carrier. But if the disease isn't going to come find you. So when we start doing more and more social distancing and start limiting the amount of social interactions we have and closing down large venues, that's how we're stopping the spread. Because if you don't come in contact with the guy, if you don't shake hands with the person who has the disease or drink after somebody who has the disease, you're never exposed, you don't get it. And the less people we can expose to the virus, the less people who contract it, and the less people who spread it, the less the death toll is, the less the impact on our hospitals will be, and the sooner this disease will end.
So you kind of touched on this, and this is a little bit of a thought I've had over the last couple of days. Kind of a thought experiment type thing. So as we're looking at all of these steps that are being taken, the self-quarantining, social distancing, all that kind of stuff. So, Braden, what if we just stop for 14 days? Everyone hits the grocery store now, stocks up, and everyone just stayed home 14 days. Is that something where, and I know it's obviously not something that won't happen, but is that something where
might have to happen?
Does that knock it out? Like, I mean,
well, it's happening in Italy right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the effective? Like, if we stop for 14 days, we will know X amount of people have it. They can go get treated, and then the rest of us are okay at that point. Is that a fair thing to say, or is that a little bit of an overreach?
It would need, if you wanted to. This is the most important issue in the world right now. Nothing else matters. We need to curtail this time now.
Right.
And you had a perfect way to shut down all travel and all interactions for 2 weeks. That wouldn't quite do it. The CDC actually has published official statements that these short-term school closures, these 14-day extended spring breaks they're not mitigating, but they're not enough. The CDC has been very clear that 14 days from now, we will not be living in a post-coronavirus world.
Mm-hmm.
And closing your school doors for 2 weeks helps. But, and if any college kids are listening, I'm not saying you won't have classes in 2 weeks, but the disease won't be gone, and expect to see those temporary, we'll see how things are going, updates postponed further and further. Don't expect to see the NBA back on the court in 2 weeks. As much as it sucks.
So 15 days.
Be the optimist, Camden. That's what I want. Yes, you got to be the optimist.
I mean, if you were to shut down everything in the country for 21 days, you could, in theory, contain the thing. But that also...
So to kind of go with the thought experiment, there is, in theory, then a magic number. I know I took a sip of water right at the wrong time.
There's definitely a magic number of time you could do that, but you can't do that isolation. There's too many people who need care. There's how many thousands of homeless people who can't quarantine themselves, or low-income people who can't afford to buy a month's worth of supplies today.
Right.
You're living paycheck to paycheck, and there's just they physically don't have the means to lock themselves in their home for a month.
I think Jeff Bezos should just stop airdropping supplies to everybody. I know he can do it.
He could do it in 2 days if you order by 5.
I also have to throw in there, though, the other factor is the asshole factor. Our buddy Rudy G. And then the family that went from New York to West Palm Beach to do their quarantine in West Palm Beach after, so when you talk about this, this quarantine, this isolation, really the only way you're going to prevent those assholes is you're going to have to pull out the National Guard. And then that just puts a whole nother aspect of it, right? I mean, then there's the, the shooting in Kent State, shooting in Kent State, where the National Guard's called out on a protest at Kent State in the 1960s. Both of you are looking at me like
I got no clue what you're talking about.
I read about it.
I mean, come on, there's a song about it. Jeez.
What song?
Oh, geez, I don't remember that song. But really,
that summer of '69?
That's the whole other thing, right? The National Guard's out. Great. Now, guess what? Now we're starting to get into movie scenario, right? Holy crap. So now I've got that 19-year-old kid with an M4 that's got an ROE that's been told, don't let anybody leave this zone. Right? I mean, I don't want to go down that path because we could talk those scenarios, and I've gone through those scenarios many times in some planning factors. Fortunately, only in planning. But I want to bring it back into that business, the business aspect. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to, as we touch on the asshole factor, I'm going to bring up something that I don't think either of you know about, and probably a lot of people listening to this don't know about. This is not the first massive pandemic that has hit the world since 2000 in this millennium. And as you're sitting here trying to think of what the other one was, it was the corrupted blood incident. World of Warcraft had a boss battle that gave a debuff to the players who were fighting it, but they would take damage over time, and made it a little harder to beat the boss. And then when you beat the boss, everyone celebrated, you got healed to full health, and you went back to town. A bug appeared in the code of the game that allowed your pets that came with you into the boss fight to also contract the disease, but not to be cured when they left the dungeon. And then those diseases began spreading. The corrupted blood debuff began to spread to other player characters throughout the town, and eventually spread to the entirety of World of Warcraft. It was being carried by the NPCs, the non-player characters like the shopkeepers, could be infected but couldn't die, and then would spread it to other people when they came to buy items. Lower level players who didn't have enough health to survive it became instantly killed when they infected it, like immunocompromised people are.
Oh my God.
It seems like this insane thing, but it's provided us an insane amount of real world data on how people react to the pandemic, because I can track where every single person who contracted the disease went at any point in time, because it's all through a simulation. And you see there were people who set up higher level healers that set up official aid stations. And there were people who would intentionally spread the disease because they don't care or because they're malicious. They created a system to mark infected and clean players. And then players decided to start marking themselves clean when they had the disease because they still wanted to go out and play the game. Mm-hmm. And you really get that view of how people react in this, of no matter how bad this gets, people are still going to want to go do their things. They're going to still want to get what they want to get done. And so we have that data actually from World of Warcraft that is famously studied by epidemiologists and is a fascinating read.
I mean, so I just have to say, as hilarious as this all is, it does remind me that in my econometrics class, my senior year of college, I went through and did an economic analysis comparing the financial crisis of Venezuela to a declining video game market, and to where you could say $1 in I think the video game we were comparing it with was Grand Theft Auto or something, and it was $1 compared to what you could get in Grand Theft Auto versus Venezuela, and we went through the full economic analysis on it. And so I just had to get that in there because, Braden, that's a hilarious but also awesome point, because it's a simulation. You can learn a lot from that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we can go in.
All right, so make fun of us now, old man. Your turn.
It is really cool that the people out there that are, currently fighting to contain this disease and have all the training, a large part of that, they look back on historical infections and the Spanish flu and the Black Plague, but a lot of our data on how we contain diseases comes from World of Warcraft.
That's hilarious.
You're right. I didn't know that. Yep, you got me on that one, buddy. But and so let's go back to before I send us off on that left turn there, as I point to the right and left. Help the business owner understand some more risk, and where knowing that I'm a business owner and I have to make my own decision, but what data points should he or she be looking at to help determine, hey, do I close the doors? I mean, obviously, if you can work from home, if you can have a dispersed team, or you already do, encourage it. Or if you can, encourage that, because that creates our social distancing.
But that leaves out tons of industries
that
can't.
So what should those business owners who have this, that are in the services field, whether it's restaurants or home care or whatever, grocery stores, what can they do? What's their decision tree, if you will?
So first and foremost, the priority you have to get in the mindset of the safety of you, your employees, and your customers needs to come before your quarterly revenue. And I know it's a really hard shift to make, but it's what we have to do if we're going to get through this disease. But you can start taking measures, and as you watch your community, know the risks, know what's going on, and if your employees start getting sick, send them home. Especially if you can't afford paid time off for sick leave, do it. If you can't, hopefully we get the ability to get that aid from the government here in the near future. But we need to limit the spread of disease. If you have symptoms, stay home. And if your community starts to get more and more overwhelmed, like parts of Washington, New York, Florida, and California right now, that's when you really need to consider, I need to close the doors. It's not worth the risk. But in the meantime, you can put immediate factors in and start mitigating the risk. You can start, depending on your market, you can close off certain things that target vulnerable populations. And you can take measures like a lot of restaurants are doing. We're going to clean seats and tables with Santa wipes every time customers change over. We're going to make sure our bathroom is full of soap and has all of these extra cleaning amenities available. Chick-fil-A's across the country have, until further notice, closed their play areas for kids because those are just germ piles. So if you're a business owner, you can look at those steps that are being taken and think, how can I operate my business more safely? What smaller cost can I impose on myself and my staff to stay in business and still generate some revenue in a way that is mitigating the threat besides just people being near other people? Increase the amount of times you're cleaning things. be overly concerned about how much you wash stuff, especially if you're in like the restaurant industry. Make sure that stuff gets cleaned. Don't be giving out plates that have not been really thoroughly washed. And you've got to watch your community and watch your people. And if you start to see too many people in the area getting sick, you need to look at closing your doors and preserving people and safety over your business revenue.
So, Braden, one question I had, and we kind of touched on this last time, but I really would love to just get the black and white, here's the answer from you on this. Because I think there's a lot of different confusion. I know I got asked this by a couple of people and I couldn't really answer it. So we talked about antibacterial and antiviral, bacteria versus viral infections, right? So what does that mean as far as different soaps, different wipes, and that kind of thing? Like, because antibacterial is still the buzzword that everyone's putting with all the soaps. But from what you're saying, that's very different, obviously. And so I know that's one of those, I'm wording it terribly because it's kind of a stupid question, but it's also like, I feel like it needs to be answered in that sense of where's the line on that? Am I buying the wrong soap type thing?
So if you're buying antibacterial soap, it is doing nothing more to help contain and protect you from this disease than regular soap.
Okay.
And in fact, many studies and CDC guidelines state that antibacterial soap doesn't help prevent you anymore from any other disease than normal soap. In fact, antibacterial soap, when you see this kills 99.9% of germs, and you go, wow, that must mean I'm safe because I've killed 99.9% of the germs. But what you don't know is for every cell in your body, there are 10 bacteria that are good, that are friendly, that are essential. You can't, when you get diarrhea, that's a symptom of the gut and your bacteria or in your intestines that usually help you digest food are dying and are below their normal healthy value. And antibacterial soap will kill off some dangerous germs, but it will kill off a ton of non-dangerous germs. And those non-dangerous germs that cover up your skin, they work as part of your innate immunity by competing with dangerous germs. There's only so much real estate on your hand. And the more of it's taken up with good, friendly, non-infectious bacteria that is supposed to be there, then the harder it is for some dangerous bacteria to get onto your hand and then spread.
Right. It's just like when we've talked about it, or sorry, you and I have, I'm not sure if it's come up on the show before, but with hydroponics and aquaponics, when you're farming, one of the big things you want to do is have a high oxygen level and things like that, where you have the proper environment for the good bacteria. And that's one of the best things you can do to prevent bad bacteria from getting in and messing up your system, because you're able to give the healthy ones the advantage. It's same type of thing.
Competitive inhibition.
Right, with just like with bokashi fermentation, right? We have there's a little self plug for Aquatunity's Food Waste Solutions. What's up? So there we have with it, you have your anaerobic bacteria that, because you create an airtight situation where there's not much oxygen, they're able to outcompete with the aerobic bacteria. Same type of thing.
Exactly. And so to be clear, wash your hands. Do it with soap. You do not need antibacterial soap. It does not provide really any benefit, and it provides literally no benefit in this particular instance. But do wash your hands, and you don't even need warm water. Studies have shown that cold water and soap is just as effective as warm water and soap, and cold water and soap is more effective than warm water and not soap. So the important factor we're getting into here is make sure you have soap in your bathroom and use it.
So the other piece of that, and just again to get the quick one sentence black and white on it, with the sanitation wipes, same type of thing. Is that the same type of thing where basically any sanitation wipe you're looking at is roughly comparable to each other? Or are you going to do a quick plug for your brand of sanitation wipes?
Well, there's definitely a difference in effective sanitation wipes. And I would like to really urge any viewers, anything homeopathic, it's not a thing. It's water. A lot of these herbal organic treatments that don't have any scientific evidence to support them, but don't use big scary chemicals, they don't do anything. But as far as the main brand Santa wipes that you buy when you go to Walmart, there is a difference. And when you see antibacterial on it, again, that's not doing a lot. But the Santa wipes do have other parts in it that can help clean it up. And if you buy a Santa wipe that has a low bleach concentration, bleach is great at breaking down proteins. And that's how it cleans the color out of your clothes.
Okay.
It breaks down the color compounds. And if you buy a low concentration bleach solution to use on hard surfaces, that is a very good way to mitigate the risk. But you shouldn't ever put any bleach on your body that has more than a 0.05% concentration. It is going to be very painful for you to buy a strong bleach Santa wipe and wash your hands with it or your face. I cannot encourage you to do that. But, kitchen counters, a like Clorox low bleach concentration wipe is a really good way to maintain that cleanliness right now.
So then we could make our own. I mean, quite simply with that, right? And hopefully restaurants and bars are doing that because the ready-made Santa wipes are been pulled off the shelf. So a gallon of bleach goes a long way when you dilute it with water, and you have your an old washcloth, dish rag, whatever,
Right.
dipping it in there, then wiping the counter, dipping it back in there because anything it picks up, you put it back in the bucket.
And the bleach will kill it.
Bleach kills it. So.
If you do decide to make homemade bleach, I encourage you to do the math on how much you're mixing. And, well, you can check the concentration of the bleach you're mixing too. But you want your total solution to probably be under 5% bleach by volume. And you're going to want to wear gloves if you're doing that, just for your safety, because you'll get nasty hands if you don't. And if you're going to be cleaning anything that, like on your body, like I said, you want to make sure your bleach is below 0.05, and you're going to want to rinse your body afterwards. And obviously avoid contact with any mucous membranes like your eyes or your mouth, because that's bad. And bleach can create chlorine gas if you use it poorly or mix it with the wrong thing. And you also want to avoid that. So DIYing bleach solutions is a answer, as long as you're informed on how you're doing it.
Watch your YouTube video first.
You're not creating a chemical weapon in your bathroom.
By the way, if you went to basic training about the time that I did, it was generally a lesson that we would learn the hard way that, yes, chlorine gas with certain cleaners.
Actually, in December, a Buffalo Wild Wings manager and I believe one other employee died when they had a spill in the kitchen of 2 cleaning products. And they created a chlorine gas. And to the manager's credit, and he died, according to the stories I've read, getting his employees out. And good on him, and that's very honorable, and he saved lives. But you need to be aware when you're mixing chemicals.
Hey, so what I want to do is bring us back to the positives. So just like we did in part 1. What's our economic positive there, Camden?
So I did a little bit of looking around of basically good industries and opportunities that we're seeing a lot of. The biggest winner right now has got to be your delivery services. It's huge, especially for food and groceries, because people don't want to go to the store anymore, and especially you don't want to go to the store, risk catching the disease, especially if they're not even going to have what you're looking at. So that's where the delivery services are really coming in. That one makes a lot of sense. Video chat, virtual meetings, and all of those type of things, I think are going to be a huge piece of this, because as people start to work from home, more and more businesses are going to have to buy into those sort of models. The last 2 I think are very interesting, because this is a trend that I saw when I was researching all of this, and it kind of goes with the idea of escapism. Is that the really big things that we're starting to see are vices, and vices in the sense of alcohol, tobacco, California, and parts where cannabis are legal. They saw huge spikes in the rates of delivery cannabis in the last few weeks. All of those type of things, because people are sitting at home. What else are you going to do but drink a bunch of beer, right? And then the last one, and it's the same type of thing along the escapism lines, is the virtual reality stuff. I think that's an area where as people get more and more fearful of the actual reality, they'll want to, like I said, use the term escapism. They want to escape back into different types of things and kind of let themselves calm down. So that's the big areas, because those all really come with the quarantine side. So if you have the money and you want to start investing in some stuff besides Purell, I think that's an area to go.
Braden, positives.
Positive, like I said last time, is that we're moving up in the way we're treating this, and people are taking it more and more seriously, and people are self-quarantining, and we're seeing a huge influx already of funds and capability. And as the number of confirmed cases rises in the next few days, like I said, because it's going to increase very rapidly, but a lot of that is us finally testing the people who had it.
Right.
And
So that shouldn't cause any more fear.
It shouldn't cause any more
Right.
fear as the number skyrockets next week.
Mhm.
Just more being aware of it. And I think it's a good positive that we'll finally have a more accurate idea of what we're dealing with as of
And sorry, I wanted to reiterate while we're talking the positive things here, that because we're looking at this economic pause, it is likely to have little lasting effects on things like global GDP, and that you're looking at lower fatality rates in developed countries and as well as in working age individuals. So there's all these little factors that are going to help the global economy continue to move once we get past this point of uncertainty where we're at.
So I've got two positives. One, and jumping on it's a pause. It's an opportunity for you as a business owner to take that pause and have some time and think, particularly since you're going to be working from home, most of you, right? You've got some time to sit, think, and consider, and what do you envision your business doing, and how do you envision your business growing? Because a lot of times when we're in the day-to-day motion of running our business, we don't have time to do that. So that pause is going to give you a great opportunity. I challenge you to do that, use that pause just for that, and create that vision and create some solutions and a plan to achieve that. And then the other piece of that is it's an opportunity to change your habits. I mean, we talk about the social distancing. That's one. The other one that we also talk about and you hear a lot about is don't touch your face. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I've probably touched my face probably 10 or 15 times in this show. I may have to go back and look. And I don't want to, right? I don't want to. So what a great way to test changing habits. Right, and test the tools of how you can change habits, because it's a natural thing we all do. Our face, all the nerves in it and stuff like that, they're always doing something, and they itch and they twitch and they things like that. And you want to touch it, and you got this, itchy nose because somebody's coming to visit you, and all those sort of things. Don't do it. Start thinking about it. If you start to consciously be aware of it, you can even track it, and you can create a score sheet for yourself and track improvements. I faced 175 times a day.
Well, I think it's so interesting because you look at it from a behavioral sense that it's really hard to change human behavior. We are not good at it. There's no magic formula at all. And I think it'll be interesting because this is one of those things in retrospect that we might be able to look at statistically is the Rudy Goberts and those type of things of like, yeah, everyone wash your hands. And then there's the guy that never washes his hands and it still really doesn't want to wash his hands, and he's not going to break that habit no matter how big and scary the disease is. And I think that's the funny thing that we're probably going to see as far as people don't change.
That's self-selection.
You realize that when you go to Walmart now, and you're like, why are they sold out of soap? Did people not buy soap last month?
Yeah, right.
I bought soap last month.
Yeah, we haven't ran to the grocery store because we have toilet paper and soap, like normal people, already here.
Oh yeah. Unless you're planning, to shut down, and isolate yourself for the next year, you probably don't need to, right?
Exactly.
So what'd you learn?
So I'm going to steal the easy one. I had never heard of the World of Warcraft story, Braden. That data set is hilarious. And I want to dive into that more. And honestly, that's a whole episode right there. That's freaking hilarious.
Actually, I'll plug, there's a YouTube channel called Extra Credits that talks a lot about gaming culture. And they have a very fascinating video examining the epidemiology of the corrupted blood incident. It's I think like a 7-minute video. It's worth checking out.
Oh, all right.
Braden, what'd you learn?
I learned that economists are looking at this as a pause. And I see a lot of the biology side of this through my friends, my Facebook news feed, and the groups I'm a part of. I don't see a lot of the economic impacts. And so all I know is that things are going down. And that I didn't know that we're expecting just like under 2% global GDP impact, which is a reassuring thing to hear.
No, that's a great one, and I love that because when you look at when you look at the fact of putting numbers on things, when you look at data, it's not that bad. Yes, it's bad, but really, a friend of mine said this about the stock market. Don't panic, because guess what? We're back down to where the stock market was this time last year.
Mhm.
Oh
Well,
my
this time
God.
18.
Yeah.
2 years.
Okay. Well, yeah, after Friday. I think I talked to him on Thursday. But it's like, oh my gosh, it's not that bad
Mhm.
if you take precautions.
And
And I think that's the critical aspect of this. And going back to what we mentioned very early on was the flattening of the curve.
Mhm.
And if we flatten the curve, we take the measures as individuals, as individual members of a society who have responsibility for the health and well-being of the society, right? Because we're members of it, and we take those measures, then we can flatten the curve.
And I think that's a great point, but I think it's very interesting with that, because I've been talking with a few people about this, and it's why you get so many different misperceptions about how people feel about these type of things, is because the numbers tell the story, and they tell the story very accurately because they're numbers. But we as people are terrible at big numbers, and we're terrible at relative percentages. When you hear 3.4% of people die, you think 3.4 is a small number, and that's it. You don't think about how many
You don't
millions of
think that's
Americans that
100
is.
million Americans.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really, I think, the thing here is where the statistics tell the story, but we have to make sure that people are understanding them properly, because it's really easy to take statistics in the wrong direction, because we're not very good. We're not, the average person is not very statistically fluent, basically.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, another show on coronavirus. Thanks for taking the time out, Braden, and providing us that science data approach. And the bottom line, my PSA is, wash your hands, be smart about this. Don't be crazy. Don't hoard stuff. There's no reason to hoard stuff. And if you run out of something, ask your neighbor. Check on your neighbors, right? Going back to, we're part of a society, so be
Communication.
part of that society, right?
Or like check on them by text or voice chat.
Yeah.
But wash your hands. Don't touch your face.
Don't lick doorknobs.
Don't touch your face, and don't lick doorknobs. All right. Hey, stay safe, be grateful, and help everybody you can.